Hey, welcome to the back scenes of the California Avocado Society. Most of you probably know me. I'm Leo McGuire. I've been with the society for years. You'll hear my same spiel as always. If you're not a member today, join. Go to the website, californiaavocadosociety.org. And it's a great organization. But with this weather, being a grower, this has been the most challenging pollination season I've seen. So I think it's a very good topic for this year. And before we start, I would like to thank the sponsors for today's meeting, Ag West, American Ag Credit, Brokaw Nursery, Calavo, Delray Avocado, Index Fresh, Nutrien, Ag Solutions, Westphalia, and of course, the San Diego County Farm Bureau, who's giving us this building and the ones that could figure out how to work this really elaborate IT system we're coming from today. It's going to be a great meeting. We're going to first talk about bees, and then the health of the bees in the industry and how hard it is to get bees to work avocados. And then, and that's from Travis Wolfe, our first speaker. And then our second speaker, I'm sure you all know, Dr. Gary Bender, Emeritus, is going to talk about years of studies with pollinators. And then as a grower, I've always heard the complaints, we've got pollinators, what am I going to do with the fruit? What do I do? How do I sell them? I'm paying water for it. I got more house, but now what are we going to do? And we're going to have a panel discussion that tells you exactly what to do with that fruit. So, Travis Wolfe, it's all yours, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Again, thank you very much for having us out to chat a little bit about the bees. My name is Travis Wolfe, representing Bee Leaf USA and the Bee Brigade. Bee Leaf USA is a full-service beekeeping company where we do honeybee rescue and relocation. We move those bees after their relocations from residential places, commercial buildings, etc. We'll move them out to a bee yard in time. We'll rebuild those colonies and they'll be prepared for pollination. Whether they go into the almonds or they go into orange groves or avocado groves, or even back into normal society as managed beehives. Some of those managed beehive situations could be either at a school, corporation, residential backyard, restaurants, hotels, etc. So that's kind of what we do. Our goal is to operate peaceful, gentle, calm bees that everybody can interface with. And then we are also here representing the Bee Brigade, which is kind of our educational extension. It is a 501c3 nonprofit charity, but we'll talk more about that in a little bit. First and foremost, let's talk a little bit about understanding honeybees, because they are complex creatures. They are prehistoric animals that have been on this planet for millions and millions of years. They've not changed a whole lot in that timeline because they've kind of figured out how this planet works really well. Bees are colonizers, so they're going to be looking for shelter and nectar. Those are going to be the two things that bees need to survive, and it's going to be the two things that kind of determines all of their actions and behaviors. Another couple of facts that we want to understand, and they're kind of pillars to our knowledge bank that we're building here. Colonies will be growing and shrinking throughout the year. So based off of the two solstices that we experience, we'll determine whether bees are going to be in an expansive phase or kind of a collapsing conservatory phase. Us as beekeepers work in concert with that. Avocado growers and growers in general can also work in concert with that. As a species, the bees can bounce back from a deteriorated state pretty quickly in the expanse seasons. Now, on the flip side of that is when the bees are in their conservation or kind of collapse phase of the year, it's very hard for bees to bounce back. And like we know in avocado growing, proper planning for the next year is really where the value is. So just like growing, bees also need proper planning and the ability to, we just got to plan things out years in advance, or at least 6 months to a year in advance. So when you're dealing with beekeepers, keep that in mind. Another thing that's kind of an important topic that everybody's kind of always up in the air is swarming. Swarming is just a natural behavior of honeybees. It is how honeybees reproduce themselves. Typically, it happens on an annual scale, at least once, possibly twice, depending on the amount of food. But typically once. That can be shifted and changes depending on the actual genetics of the bees. For example, an Africanized or super aggressive colony can swarm up to 7 or 8 times in a year. And that's simply because they're hyperactive, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. On the whole, well, now we're going to shift and talk a little bit more about bee health. So on the whole, honeybee health is actually doing pretty good this year. It's something that we should look at in kind of a moment to moment sort of situation, because in the past, in drought situations in California, the bees have had a very hard time. But right now, because we're in that expansion phase, there's lots of food around, the bees are doing very well. And that's bees in a managed sense, as well as the feral bees and the Africanized bees living all around in the mountains, rural areas, etc. So ultimately, the reason why they're doing healthy is because of the massive rains that we got at the top of the year. Granted, it did kind of confuse a lot of the plants and cycles and whatnot, but the rain itself has prompted a lot of flowers and a lot of forage for the bees that is not typically there. From what I understand, and I've only been beekeeping for less than 10 years, but about 7.5, we haven't had rains like this or blossoms like this in about 20 to 30 years. So it is a particularly special year in that we are seeing the groundwater is still available for these plants, which is allowing a lot more blooms for an extended length of time. In addition, there's plants that are popping up and blossoming that we don't typically see just because the groundwater is already so sapped at this time of the year. Why is that important? It's because the multitude of different variations and types of pollens and nectars that are coming off all those different plants is what gives the bees a robust diet and gives them the ability to, or that gives their bodies the ability to fight off the pests, the diseases, and the issues that are naturally going to occur inside of a beehive. So as we know, the more food you have inside the more good food you have inside your body, the stronger you are, the stronger your cell walls are. Bees are the exact same thing, but their food is multiple different types of flowers. So we're going to talk a little bit about feral bees, managed honeybees, and Africanized bees. Managed honeybees, for the most part, are going to be docile bees. They're farmed bees. They're really great honey producers, great for pollination. And these are the bees that you want on your actual property. It's going to be the bees that you guys can walk right up to. Your workers, grove workers, can get right up next to them, and they're not bothered by the bees. There's no issues. The bees are focused on their work. They are a little bit more susceptible to pests, so they do require more management, but that is the offset that we get. If we are going to have docile bees, they're going to require a little bit more attention. On the flip side, the more aggressive bees, the more capable they are of standing on their own. That said, talking about feral bees, again, they're doing fantastic right now, and that's simply because the amount of food that's around. We know this because having a background in rescue and relocation, there has been a massive uptick in honeybee colonizations in the rural areas. And that gives us a direct correlation between the feral bees that are living there and their expansion and growth. Taking it a step further, the San Diego County currently projects about 60 to 80% of the feral bee populations are what we consider Africanized or heavily aggressive. So for that reason, if you do keep feral bees, in time, they will become aggressive. They will eventually get large enough to where they have a lot of investment to defend. And once that occurs, you can deal with really spicy hives really quickly. So we definitely encourage managed beehives across the board. Now we talk about Africanized beehives. We're going to go over it really quickly. But what it is it's essentially like a mutant bee that came from Brazil, from a Brazilian lab. It was an experiment with the West African honeybees. So basically the West African honeybee has this fantastic ability to move throughout the deserts of West Africa, finding nectar, finding all the resources it needs. And it was very migratory. It moved all around, very easy, finding different blooms and food, swarmed very frequently in order to capitalize on that. And a Brazilian scientist back in the late 80s, I believe it was, had said, let's blend that bee with the Brazilian honeybees and see if we can, make a super bee. Well, it's exactly what happened, except for the super bee also produced hyper aggressive tendencies on top of its hyper productive tendencies, hyper hygienic, across the board. The bees are very, very solid bees. They're not going to die anytime soon. In fact, I'm of the opinion that these bees will continue to exist even if humans cease to exist. That's simply because they are built to survive. And as we see bees kind of disappearing from farms and things like that, the concept of colony collapse disorder is at the forefront. But the reality is that these feral bee colonies and these Africanized bee colonies will retreat away from the farms where pesticides are being sprayed, where they're not getting the care and attention they need to go live naturally in places that they know they can survive. Again, they've been here as prehistoric animals for billions of years. They're gonna live and survive. It's our job as growers and beekeepers to work in concert with the other pieces of nature that we have. One of the other things that we want to focus on is keeping these managed bees is very important because it's directly combating the feral or defensive Africanized bee population. And the reason being is because those bees are going to reproduce at least five times faster in most cases. That being said, there's 5 times as many boys out there. So when it comes time to mate, those genetics are much more likely to be seeping into the rest of the managed colonies and things like that. So again, just a little bit of information for you guys on that. Now, some people, growers already have bees in their groves, are already working with beekeepers across the board. So we're going to talk a little bit about the pests that as growers, you guys could help beekeepers with, and the pests that batter beehives fastest. So first off, we have ants. In Southern California, ants are going to be one of the fastest and most detrimental threats to a beehive. And the reason being is because bees can't sting an ant, and their only protection against ants is to propolize their beehives, essentially sealing that hive itself. That being said, a string of ants overnight can still march into that hive if it's not protected. And that creates a challenge because the next morning, those bees, if their honey is consumed by ants, they will leave that hive, they will take off, and it's pretty much unmanageable at that point. You've lost the resource. You're not sure whether those bees are going to be pollinating your property. So ants are one of the biggest issues that we deal with. Taking it a step further and a little bit smaller, let's talk about mites, because mites are going to be the most elusive threat that we don't actually have the ability to see visually without extra apparatus or methodology. So the mites are a parasite. It's an external parasite on the honeybee that basically attaches itself to the adult bees to travel from hive to hive, and then it colonizes inside of the actual hive, and it colonizes inside of the brood. The brood is where the baby bees are developing, and ultimately what happens is these mites are going to feast on the fat stores of the baby bees as they're developing, and it results in them having various deformities. The main one is going to be deformed wing virus. What that does is it basically stops the wings from developing on the bee, and within a couple of generations, there's enough bees that can no longer fly. Therefore, there's no resources coming in, and the colony will peter out and die. Can be combated simply by treatments and taking care of your bees and watching them. So it's something that if you're ahead of the ball and you're watching it, just like your trees, etc., if you're watching for the pest and you're being preemptive, you'll be okay. Mites only reproduce inside of the bee colony, so we can be pretty confident in how we manage the colonies and how we treat them, because that's the only place that they're reproducing. So that being said, you can get ahead of it because they don't have all these different weird pockets that you got to look at. Diseases, various diseases affect honeybees. However, right now, because there is such an abundance of good food and a variety of good food for the bees, their immune systems are increased and their immune systems are doing very good. On top of that, in Southern California, we don't have a ton of year-round moisture. So that means that we're going to have a lot of like dry heat. In that situation, you're not going to get many funguses or certain diseases that require that sort of incubation, where the bees can't leave the hives frequently. On the other side of the coin, what we do deal with is we do deal with more drought situations where the bees need more water than other bees would, where they need more shade. They just have a different set of challenges or threats. And then lastly, let's talk about pesticides. Pesticides at the end of the day, and insecticides are meant to kill, and they're meant to stop something. 9 times out of 10, if the blossoms are being sprayed, that's going to result in an immediate decimation of a honeybee colony, usually within a couple of days. There's a wide variety of poisons that can hurt and harm honeybees. And the best way as growers to combat that and to help maintain a good, healthy honeybee population in your area is to make sure that you're spraying at the right times. Not only that, you want to be in concert and you want to be in communication with the beekeepers that you're working with and or around, because if you have to spray something for some reason, letting them know, giving them some sort of heads up is very important, because then they can do whatever actions they need to protect their bees for that time. Beekeepers want the success of growers just as much as growers want the success of beekeepers. We work in the same direction. And so it is a mutually beneficial success there. Taking that a step further, we understand that, sometimes pesticides and things have to get applied. And so again, it's kind of about rebuilding that connection with the beekeeper so that if something has to be done, it can be appropriately addressed. One of the things that we find is kind of important, because on the topic of pesticides, is despite being resilient and strong, when a bee colony is decimated, it does take time to rebuild. Even if it is a happy year and a good year for bees, it takes time for it to rebuild naturally. Otherwise, you do need to artificially bring in new bees for whatever reason. What else did I have here? Oh, I mentioned about the timing of bee colonies similar to avocados and things like that, because it takes so long for avocados to develop and things like that. If a honeybee colony is decimated from pesticides in your grove or near your grove, etc., one of the things that you can expect is not only does the immediate pollination stop, but the bees have to then rebuild, which hiccups that timeline even further. And I know that one of our next speakers is going to be chatting about the efficacy of a beehive versus an avocado tree being pollinated by bees and not pollinated by bees. And it's a massive, massive difference. And so for that reason, you could, improper use of pesticides will ultimately result in possibly multiple years of reduced crops. Now, talking more about just bees on the avocados specifically. Bees only want the avocado nectar, unfortunately. They're not after the pollen. So when the bees are pollinating the avocado plant, from what I understand, it only takes about 20 granules of pollen to come from the male to the female flower to allow that fruit to eventually set. Now, at the same time, both male and female flowers do provide nectar to honeybees, so they will frequent both of those no matter what. However, bees do not have the strongest affinity for avocados. And that's one of the challenges, is how do we get bees onto the actual avocado blossoms if there's better food available? We have some ways that we think would work best. We'll talk about those in just a second, but classically, 1 to 2 colonies per acre has been used to effectively pollinate an avocado grove. Now, I know that in the last couple of years, I have heard of people going as many as 5 to 6 hives per acre. And again, it just really depends on your overall situation. But we are learning that an increased number of bees actually is helping that. That said, it is very important to also understand that the size of the trees is going to be very relevant in the number of colonies that you're going to want. To elicit a strong response from the honeybees onto the avocados, if you're going to be bringing the colonies in and you're not going to have colonies on your actual space, you want to do it between about 0 to 5% of the blooms opening or the blossoms opening. And the reason is because as those are starting to open, the bees have a sense and can sense that okay, this is going to continue. So once they get their sights set on that nectar, it makes it a lot easier for them to keep frequenting. The scouts know it's there. And so if you time it properly, that can be to your advantage. To that could be, partnering with a beekeeper that has a growing operation. A small number of hives, or rather a large number of small hives, will increase the local pollination. Small hives don't travel nearly as far as some of the larger hives to get their nectar and pollen, so they're not so aware of the various nectars that could be better, that are just a little bit further away. However, it does accomplish the same goal that we both want to see, which is avocados pollinated and the bee colonies growing. Meanwhile, you also have a nice shaded area. That's really important because bees are going to spend about 60 to 80% of their time working on the balancing of the temperature inside the colony. So by providing them anything that they can kind of create a nice homeostasis with, it puts them in a much better position. Like I said, two things you could do is, one, bring in colonies. If you're going to hire someone to bring them in because you only want bees around for 2 months out of the year, then you want to time that and make sure the beekeeper knows well in advance as to how they time that, because one of the challenges we have is avocados oftentimes collide with almonds depending on the season. And when you have the almonds coming first and people are paying these hefty prices for the almonds, they're always going to come before that. Now, that being said, these contracts are being signed in the fall, so it's not out of the question to just simply have those conversations at the same time and say, hey, look, let's sign contracts, before the flip of the year. That way, as avocado growers, you can be certain I'm locked in with my pollination and I'm not worried about that. Otherwise, you are kind of at the whims of the almonds, because if bees aren't released from the almonds, beekeepers aren't going to have their bees yet, and it creates some issues. But that being said, the other option is going to be your small growing colonies, because again, those bees aren't going to look so far. They're going to go straight to the most available food sources, which is going to be right up in the trees, right up in that canopy on top of them. So as a beekeeper and someone who has had all sorts of relationships, whether they be just simply land trades or they are actual pollination contracts, I'll tell you, there's a couple of ways that we can all help each other. And this is kind of the most awesome part, is that we all have the same goals. And what beekeepers need is a space to keep their bees. Year round is usually best for them, but somewhere that's accessible by truck. Most groves are already outfitted for this type of stuff. Accessible by truck, somewhere flat. If there is the ability to have them shaded, that helps a beekeeper massively. And by kind of opening those doors, you'll allow beekeepers to say, okay, cool, can I start setting up my bees here? And you have these conversations with them about how they're managing their bees. You have conversations with them about how they're managing their avocado, or how you're managing your avocados, so that you guys can be aware of all of the factors involved. On top of that, you're going to be set up for success because you're helping the beekeeper, and his bees really do want to be on your tree. Yeah, so ultimately you get free pollination. On the flip side, beekeeper gets what they need to. The other thing you can do is pollination agreements. Like I mentioned, I know that across the board, there's a lot of different rates being thrown out there. The highest rate I have heard of in San Diego County for avocado pollination is $200 per hive, which is that's a lot in my opinion, because it's right there next to the almonds. On the other side of the coin, I've seen it as low as about 75, depending on the agreement that the beekeepers have with the individual landowners. So it can go all across the board. As time goes, I imagine the more we can all work in concert together, we'll stabilize that number, and it'll be a lot easier for everybody to kind of work off of. Like I said, if you're going to do pollination agreements and contracts, I highly, highly suggest locking beekeepers in and getting a signed contract before the almond stuff occurs, because that protects you. When you're developing relationships with beekeepers, beekeepers and farmers, we all have this really great ability to go off of handshakes and things like that, which makes it really easy because, we can trust each other. But at the end of the day, a little document, a little piece of paper that says, look, I'm doing this, you're going to do this. And it just makes everything so clear cut that we've had the most success in that way. mostly because if there is an issue, let's say it rains a bunch and the mud's coming down and it's washing out beehives or something like that, it's written down as to how that'll be taken care of, when it's got to get taken care of, et cetera, access hours, things like that. So as farmers, you guys know, okay, cool, that's the beekeeper. He comes these times normally, and you're not running outside with a shotgun, being like, who's down there, going crazy or nothing. So continuing, we highly suggest also just like working with the beekeeper and really communicating. The fabric of like farming partnerships is kind of deteriorated in the modern day. And the goal is really to like kind of restart this network and to get people working together on the same goals. Moving forward, if you guys want to have bees or want to become beekeepers yourselves, there's a number of opportunities for that type of stuff. A lot of local organizations that can help you. Our organizations can help you too, whether you want to learn beekeeping or you just simply want bees on your property. If you got enough space, there's opportunities for free bees on your property. If it's something where you just want a handful of bees, you typically are going to have to pay for that type of stuff. But like I said, we're really interested in working with avocado growers locally. And I know that the beekeeping industry as a whole is too, but everyone's just a little too scared or doesn't know how to get into the right pockets together. So hopefully this can be a step towards that. And yeah, I want to open up the floor for any questions if anybody had anything.
Travis, I forgot to mention at the beginning that we're going to go ahead and if you're remote, put your questions in on chat, and at the end of the meeting, we'll bring all the speakers back and go through that. But I do have a question right now. Colony collapse disorder, the apocalypse. I mean, the media was talking about it like mad. What is the status on that? I mean, has the media just found something else to pick on?
A little bit of that, a little bit of the fact that the media is focused on other things that are going to elicit stronger views, because sadly the news is not focused on positives. It's focused on negatives, and that's where it's going to get most of its stuff. That being said, we do still see colonies dying off at the rate of about in the commercial sector at about 40 to 50, sometimes up to 60%. Wow. So it's not a problem that's gone away, but there is a little bit more knowledge and information about it at this point, which is there's a way to combat it. It just takes a lot more effort and it's more costly, it's more expensive. So there's ways to combat it, but as farmers, we all know that dollars aren't always the most plentiful thing, and so that balance is very important.
Okay, well, that's great. Good to know the apocalypse is not coming today, but it's down the road. I really enjoyed your presentation. I learned a term today, a spicy hive. I have met some spicy hives before, and it was not a friendly relationship, but it was great. So thank you.
Okay, I'm Gary Bender. I'm a retired farm advisor with the University of California Cooperative Extension here in San Diego County. And we're going to be talking about flowering and pollination. I'm going to be saying just a little bit of definition first. Pollinizers is the word that we use for the trees that are pollinizing, say, or Hass or so for the other varieties. Pollinators are the insects that do the pollination. So pollinizers, pollinators, and trust me, I've used that term wrong in the past myself. So finally getting straightened out on that. I saw this interesting comment back in 1964 by Bob Berg. Bob was the avocado breeder at UC Riverside. And he said the title of this was Avocado Yields Increased by Interplanting Different Varieties. And the whole article contains information about different varieties next to each other. And it was back before we had a lot of Hass, I guess. A lot of Fuertes, Dickinson, MacArthur's, all kinds of other varieties. Almost every time they'd have one next to each other, they'd see an increase in yield on both varieties. And he stated here, he starts off with Popano. Popano was the first plant explorer down in Guatemala and Mexico looking for new varieties. Popano once stated that an acre of land will yield a larger amount of food when planted to avocados than it will to any other tree crop known. Berg says this may be true in more tropical areas, but in California for the 17 harvesting seasons from 1945 to 1961, average annual yield per bearing avocado was only 3,700 pounds. And he said, in fact, low yields are a recognized and serious drawback to avocado production in California. So that's what we're focusing on here today. Now, the average avocado yields now for CAS are probably about double that. We know a lot more about irrigation, a lot more about fertilization, pest control, and rootstocks. But we still need to be higher than that. This is a tree of avocado in full flower. It produces a lot of flowers, and it's a sequential thing. So starts early, sometimes starts as early as January, goes on through into May. But I just took a picture a couple days ago of a tree still in flower and setting fruit. This is the middle of June, and normally in that particular grove, I worked there a lot before. That's about April 15th. So because of the clouds and the low temperatures and things, it's shoved things back a little bit, a lot. Flowers are grown on what they call a panicle. And you can see here we have open and unopened flowers at the same time. And this is, like I said, a sequential operation. This is set just 2 or 3 days ago. If you look really closely, it's a little bit hard. The flowers have all fallen off. You still see the little stems here. They're in the process of falling off, but you can see some little BB fruit. And this is a little bit bigger one. You can see the fruit just a little bit bigger. Now, these are trees on the outside of the grove exposed to full sunlight. Okay, they have a lot of flowers. We know they have at least 1 million flowers. And we know that because we've had graduate students at UC Riverside go out and count these things, and multiple times. They not just one tree, but a lot of trees. But a good fruit set has about 200 of these flowers that set fruit and stay on the tree until harvest, representing about 10,000 pounds per acre. Each fruit is 8 ounces. So that if they're all size 48, that's what you'd have. Occasionally we have more. 500 flowers would represent about 25,000 pounds per acre. They've calculated that physiologically, about 30,000 pounds per acre would be the maximum that a grove could do. Okay, factors that affect flowering. Juvenility. Most cultivars will not begin to flower until the 3rd year after planting. We do have some precocious varieties, and I think gem is considered to be one of them. If flowers can flower earlier, it just depends on a lot of circumstances. Most ungrafted seedlings have a long juvenile phase and may not be produce fruit for 10 years. And I know you remember the Avocado Commission had this thing several years ago where they were suggesting that we stick toothpicks in seeds and put them in a glass of water in the kitchen sink and let them grow, turn into a tree. Really cool. But I've met so many people who did that, and they keep asking me, why is my tree not producing fruit? It has a long juvenile phase, and sometimes they never really do produce fruit. Okay, the panicles of flower are produced mostly on the outside of the tree in the sunlight. It presents a problem for our pruning program because there's always something on that tree. And they're on the outside. We want to prune. We'll be pruning off flowers or little fruit or big fruit. It's really tough to figure out when to prune. Mexican cultivars flower earliest, West Indians next, and Guatemalans last. Now the CAS is a combination of a Mexican and a Guatemalan. Most of the fruiting wood grows in August, and the August flush in California. And that's a mistake I see a lot of growers do. They're pruning late in the summer. They're pruning off their fruiting wood that'll be turned into flowers for the next spring. Temperature. So flowering is induced by a period of low temperature, 59 degrees 50 day, 50 Fahrenheit night. But we don't want it too low. If we get too much lower, then we're going to have some problems. And that's some work done by Bob Berg. Day length doesn't seem to be an important factor. Water stress, we've tried some experiments where we stress trees in November, thinking they would put out a better flower. All it did was build up the salt content in the leaves, and we had actually less flower. We have this on year, off year thing. It's not well understood, but we think it's related to starch content in the flowers. And I think that might have been some work done by Carol Lovett. So high starch content led to better fruit set, low starch content, less fruit set. And usually what happens on an on year, we set really heavy and all this fruit kind of drags this starch out of the tree and it takes a while to build up. And we also see the on-off thing going with the whole growth. And that's usually set up by a weather event. Like we had perhaps a real hot June, all the fruit fell off. They went through the whole year with no fruit. And then it was all ready to set a big crop next year, or possibly a frost event. We have this thing called determinate and indeterminate. Determinate means it ends with the flower buds and there's no leaf coming through here. Indeterminate means we have a leaf bud and the leaf will grow out through the flowers and drag nutrients out of the flowers. So we seem to have more of that here in California. We're getting less fruit set down in Mexico, a little more tropical. They have more determinate and they think that's, well, they suggest possibly that's one reason they get better fruit set. Okay, we're going to be going into flower structure now. And this is important for everybody to remember, I think. Flower opens twice, first as a female, and then it closes and it opens as a male the next day. And this is, and then if it doesn't set, that flower will fall off. Okay, we're going to talk about A and B flower types in the next slide here. The flowering sequence works as long as average temperature is above 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Holder delays female opening and may push male opening into the night. In the below average 60 Fahrenheit, there may be no fruit set. So you can imagine what's going on if we have the male flowers opening at night, the bees are back in their hive. So that's one big reason when it's too cool, we're just not getting good fruit set. Okay, A and B flower types. Now, CAS is considered to be an A flower type. They open as a female in the morning, close, and then open as a male in the afternoon of the next day. And then, like I said, if they don't set, they'll fall off. The B type opens as a female in the afternoon and then closes and opens as a male in the morning. So if you have a B next to an A, the CAS will be female. Let's say the Zutano will be male. And if you have a B, if it hits the Zutano and then hits the CAS, you usually have some pollination going on. You can tell yourself, the female stage has the stigma sticking straight up. Let's see, on the style, the style is the little stick there. The stigma is at the top, that's sticky. And if the bee's rummaging around, if pollen's on the back of the bee, it'll land on that sticky stigma, and then the pollen will grow down through and pollinate that ovule there, turns into a seed, and the fruit will follow. Okay, the lower right-hand one, this is the male stage. All the anthers are sticking up. They're opening, pollen's being released, but usually around here, the stigma is dry by that time. And usually we don't get fruit set in that same flower, the male pollinating the female. A little bit difficult to see here. The lower right picture is a little better. You can see the anthers sticking up. And on the female, the anthers will be laying down. You can see the stigma sticking straight up. So you guys can go out and look at your own flowers and see what you got there. Now, what about flowering sequence? Okay, the blue at the top, those are female opening. And then males will be in the afternoon. The yellow here is what they call dehiscence. That's when the anthers start to open up, pollen's released. And so there's a little bit of crossover in your CAS grove. If you have a pure CAS grove, we're probably getting most of, and the temperature's correct, we're probably getting most of our fruit set right around noon. And then, okay, on the B flower types, this is say a Zutano or a Bacon or a Huerde, the male in the morning, and then close, and then female in the afternoon. You can see a little bit of crossover at noon there too. Okay, so this is a temperature, how temperature influences the timing of the female and male. The top one here, if I can see a little closer, this is a little bit warmer. And this is 87 degrees Fahrenheit in the day, 47 at night. So it's warm during the day. females opening for a pretty short time there. It looks like about 9 o'clock to maybe 11 o'clock. And then the male is opening in the afternoon. Let's see, about probably around 3 o'clock to a little bit later. Okay, so and then the cool. Oh, sorry, I'm incorrect about that. On the what's cooler, the lower one there, the red's opening a little later. It's like around 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and the male is opening on into the night. Okay, types of pollination. Cross-pollination is just what I was talking about. The pollens transfer from the male flowers of type A to female flowers of type B and vice versa. Okay, it's been shown in a lot of research, a lot of papers. You can find them on Avocado source on pollination. Substantial increase in yield, and the trees are like 1 to 2 rows away. There's a moderate increase. We're a little bit farther away, 15 rows away. And I've had some people say, well, I got a fuerte up by the barn and I've got 5 acres of hass down there. That should take care of it. No, it won't. It'll take care of maybe the trees closest to it, but that's about it. Close pollination. This is when pollen from the male flowers pollinate the female flowers in the same tree or the court of the cultivar. So that same flower is pollinating itself, probably occurring during overlap of the female male flowers at noon. Okay, that's not in the same flower. I meant neighboring flowers. Right around noon, when I was talking about, you have male and female crossing each other. Self-pollination. When pollen from the anthers either blow into or fall into the stigma of the same flower. That doesn't seem to be working here in California at all. Perhaps in a little more tropical areas it does. Perhaps maybe the stigma stays a little stickier. And so that when the anthers open and that stigma is still there, if it's sticky, it could pollinate. And that might be one reason why they're getting better pollination in the tropical areas. Okay, so here's A and B flower pollinizer trees. Hass, Jim, Lambhass, Reed, Pinkerton, Gwen, Harvest. On the B side, you've probably heard of these, mostly in California, the Zutano, Bacon, Ettinger, and Fuerte. And then, so we got some new ones coming along. You'll see perhaps that the nursery is starting to show up here, one called Luna UC, and then Waterhole and Charwell. Charwell, I don't see too many around here. That's the main one grown in Hawaii. Okay, what about, this is a trial done in Oxnard, looking at different varieties when they're opening here. So it depends on what kind of area you're at, what kind of temperature you're at. This was just happened to be 1 year. This is some interesting deal here. They kept trees at 3 different temperatures, a high, mid, and low. The flowering cycle is 63 to 54, prolonged the flowering 36 to 72 hours. Overlap, most of the overlap is occurring around 67 high and 68 low. Earlier, one of the earlier slides, I said, as long as it's just a little bit above 70 degrees, you're in good shape during the spring. Okay. Then fertilization means the pollen reaching the ovule to form the seed occurred at all temperatures, except the lowest. Embryo development occurred at all temperatures, but fruitless subsided at high temperatures. And that's what we see, fruit falling off at the high temperatures. Okay, this is an experiment where, let's see, row 1 and row 2 on the left side here were Ettingers, and then the rest of the grove is Hass. And you can see right next to the Hass is set pretty heavy. Right next to the Ettinger is set pretty heavy on the Hass, and then decreased as you walk across the rows here. And this graph represents 3 different years. This is a study in Israel. 1 month after the fruit set, most of the fruits were selfs, Hass pollinating Hass, and that's what we mostly have. But by the end of the season, most fruits on the tree were hybrids of Ettinger Hass, and Fuerte Hass. So that's important. What does that mean? Okay, their conclusion, Hass pollinating Hass had a very high drop rate. If you can get a bee flower in there, you're going to have a better sticking rate. Now we're going to talk a little bit about a trial done by Mary Lou Arpaia in Ventura. They were looking at different pollinizers, and this is called the Debuscher trial. On the red line are the HAS that they harvested for yield data. On the vertical lines are different pollinizer trees. And so they looked at, so as they were harvesting HAS, they looked at distance away from the pollinizer trees. And this is what they saw when the HAS was in the same row as the pollinizers. Bees were coming down the row, pollinizing. We get better fruit set there. And then 27 feet away, and then 54 feet away. They just put 3 representations here. They had quite a few other distances, but and you can see it dropping off. So that's what we see all the time. And I was talking to Ben Faber about this. He said he could see the bees coming down the row of the pollinizers and bouncing back and forth between that and the HAS, and then just going back to the hive. They weren't even necessarily going around the tree, pollinate, and I see that all the time. And I told Ben, a lot of times I was down on my hands and knees taking soil samples. I look up and one side of the tree was full of fruit. The other side of the tree didn't have any. And I was usually down there with the grower and I said, by any chance, is there a Zutano over there? And 100% of the time, they always said yes. We were right next to a pollinizer tree. This is all the pollinizers, like I believe, put together. And you can see within the row, it's very high, and then it dropped off through the years. Now, in the off year, it didn't seem to make any difference here. Okay, and this is probably a valuable slide for you to remember. This is what type of pollinizers. Querity looks like it led the league here. But when I set up my cross-pollination, my high density trial, I used Zutanos because that was what was most available at the time, and they were doing pretty good too. And then you can see it drop off Ettinger, Bacon, and the rest here. Okay, well, we need to keep doing research on varieties here. We'd like a type B flower tree that overlaps with the HAS flowering, good quality fruit, similar in look to HAS. We like to have everything a size 48. And one of the ones they came up with was Surprise. It kind of came in and fell out of favor a little bit. And but it's got a small seed, a large flesh content in the fruit. It is black, but it has a ridge down the side. And we can't pretend these are HAS. I mean, the variety is what the variety is, and it has to be sold as that. Okay, so the season of maturity averaged about 6 to 8 weeks earlier than HAS. Oh, okay. Some people had thought this might be a good cold, a variety for cold areas because it's got more Mexican genes in it, but it didn't really seem to work that way. It's just as sensitive as HAS to frost. Here's a bee with a pollen load, and I think we'll be talking about pollinators just a little bit here. Now, like Travis said, they're not really going for the pollen usually. They're going for the nectar, but they've got a lot of little tiny hairs on their back that are kind of crooked hairs, and they grab pollen just kind of by accident a lot of times. We set up this trial. Well, I didn't set it up. This is done back in 1955. We had different types of trees here, and we had a HAS. They were caged trees, and you can see where we had bees inside. We put a colony inside, and we're in the HAS, and you can see the colony inside where on the Zutano, and then with the caged trees with no bees inside, you can see the fruit set. So that HAS ranged from 5 fruit per tree to 284 fruit per tree with the beehive inside. So, and I'll notice this too. If you can have bees right next to your grow, usually that row is just buzzing with bees, and that's when you get your best fruit set. It's close to the hives. Ben Faber had a thing on topics and subtropics, a little blog about other types of insects, and he said they've noticed that they found 20 different types of flies that have been found in orchards, moving between male and female flowers. But we've never really proven they're pollinators. And if you look at their backs with electron microscopes, you don't really see the hairs like you do on the bees, but I imagine that's probably a future research project. So how do you improve your pollination? Bring bees into the grove. Don't rely on natural bee populations, because over the years they've kind of been disappearing and dying out, and houses built and things are like that. And they're recommending to use at least 1 to 2 hives per acre. In Israel, they've done some work and they think it should be around 3 to 4 hives per acre. Add pollinizer trees to the grove like we've been talking about. Keep the grove open, have a wall of flowers all the way down to the ground. I've said this before, the best producing trees are always like a big fat Christmas tree, all the way down to the ground, so you can give an aisle for the bees to fly up and down the aisle. And then have water available to the bees. If you don't, then they have to go scout for a long ways away, look for reservoirs or pools or things like that. So this is at the Staley Grove here. You can see they have a deal with one of the beekeepers. They can store the bees here. The bees do go out for pollination and almonds, and then they come back in time for the Hass flowering. And they're usually a little wild and crazy when they come back. They don't like being handled. So you got to be careful of these. And some come back African hives, and sometimes they have to requeen the hives. Now on the right is just a little pool of water. Something I recommended because they were flying all the way down to the reservoir, and the pool is really close to here. And they planted water hyacinths in here. And if you look inside here, the whole pool is just, and they're landing on the water hyacinths, and they are just, it's so crowded there. I think they need some more pools, but they're really going for it. Here's our high density trial. I think many of you probably been here. We had every Hass next to a Zutano, and then we wanted to keep the aisles open. And that took a lot of pruning. And that's usually one of the things that growers kind of resist. It takes labor, but it does pay off in the yield. If you don't prune, then your high density is going to look just like this. So where are the leaves? Where are the flowers? They're way up at the top, and you just lessened your fruit production. Here's our data. You've probably seen this. The blue is our Hass yield per acre. The red is the California average yield. Okay, what do you do with the Zutano fruit? Every time I give a talk about high density, I get this question. What are we going to do with all this fruit? Should we even harvest it? Well, I would say a couple things. Keep funding varietal breeding. We need a good Hass-like cultivar that can be sold for, if we can develop a high price for it. And listen to the next talk. So we're going to have a discussion on what to do with all these fruit. And I think that'll be pretty good. Okay, so thank you. I forgot to put my email up here, but we can if you want me to provide that to you later, we can do that. Okay, Leo.
Well, great. Thanks, Gary. And I just want to let everyone know in the audience that we have 2 directors here today that are also on the CAS board. Camille Eaton is our IT. Wave, Camille.
Hello.
And if it wasn't for her, if it was left up to me, we'd still be trying to figure out why the camera didn't work. So thank you, Camille, for all the hard work today getting this thing to work. And then a new director for CAS is Craig Alder, and he has put together a group of people to answer the question that Gary just asked. What do we do with all that fruit? So Craig, if you want to put together your committee, and we'll if you want to introduce everyone.
Leo.
We'll yes.
Gary is a director also.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, another new director. Wow. We have 4
And
directors.
you.
Yeah. And those of you that are hearing online, Sosin it holds everything together and reminds me of who all of our directors are, even the new ones. So thanks, Sosin.
Okay, so this is our panel discussion on alternative marketing, also known as what to do with all those Zutanos or surprise or whatever else, essentially everything other than Hass. So let let me first give you a little definition of alternative marketing that we can work with. What I mean by alternative marketing is anything other than just calling up a packing house and saying, come and take all my fruit away and send me a check. You know, anything different than that. So for some growers, calling up a packing house and saying, come take my fruit away and send me a check is the best thing to do. But for other growers, it's not. And for some growers, a portion of their fruit, like their Zootanos or something, that might not be the best thing to do. So, so we're going to talk today about different other things to do. And let me, yeah, and hopefully we'll make sure to go through the pros and cons of each of those alternative marketing outlets as well, so we can understand whether or not you want to explore them, whether they're right for you and right for what different varieties and so forth, because everyone's got a different situation, right? Okay, so to that end, I've got 5 total amazing panelists with all kinds of firsthand experience to share up here. To my right is Andrew Dickinson and Jeff Dickinson, and then David Estrella, Nick Stridsberg, and Nick Krnich. Let me start by having them introduce themselves a little bit more. And then I'll ask them a few questions. And if it's okay with Leo, if you guys at least here today have some questions for them, we can discuss within the room, and then we can take some Zoom questions after that. Yeah. Okay. So guys, please just maybe tell us your name again, and then where you're at, and your ranch or your what you grow and what you pack a little bit, just a little bit about your operation, and then I'll have some questions for you after that. Why don't you start, Andrew?
Yeah. So I'm Andrew Dickinson. We're located up in Fallbrook. Been there a long time as a family. I'm 4th generation on the farming side. We operate as a grower, a packer, and a farm management company. My father and I own the business together. And like I said, we've been growing a long time. Packing is a little bit newer for us. We started in March of 2020. And that side of the business is growing fast for us. So.
And I'm Jeff Dickinson. And as Andrew said, we're a North County Fallbrook family. Like many of you that grow, we've been doing this for a lot of years. We started the packing house really as a way of trying to figure out how we can do exactly what we're talking about today, how we can increase our margins on our own fruit, as well as marketing fruit for other smaller growers, especially. So we've been doing avocados for 30 plus years, but we're also managing other crops as well as a diversity, so we have a year-round supply of produce.
My name is David Estrella. I'm a farm operations manager for Limelight Robes. Now working into becoming the business developer of the farm. We're farming 130 acres of citrus and avocado and specialty fruits. And we're still trying to figure out, which route we're going to take. I've expanded the farmers market side of the business and trying to develop that heavily. And we also, we built a packing house to take over our fruit and run it through there because we were having a couple problems with the traditional packing house, white labeling our fruit through other packing houses. So we decided to take control of it, and we built our own, and we're running our own fruit through it. We're still trying to figure out how to expand the business, take it to the next level.
I'm Nick Stridsberg, excuse me, with San Gabriel Ranch. So a family farm, started about 30 plus years ago, farm about 100 acres, mostly organic. Probably have 13 different varieties of fruit, including avocados. So really started marketing and selling our own fruit directly out of necessity. kind of on the citrus side when the packing house started. Like the returns got less and less, and a lot of them went out of business. It was either close up shop or start selling our own fruit. So that's what we decided to do, and we're still here and done okay. So hopefully I can share some of that insight with you guys.
My name is Nick Krnich, and I'm here with Everdawn Farms. It's a small family farm operation. We have 2 farms in the Fallbrook area. I'm a part owner with my parents, and I think technically I'm a 5th generation farmer. My great grandfather came over here from Scotland on my mother's side many years ago, and started in the Oceanside area. We mainly specialize in avocados and subtropical fruit, and we like to grow trees very close together in high density, and we're a certified organic operation. And we're leaning into the regenerative agricultural practices. And so we're really excited about that. And I'm very new to direct marketing. So I'm actually really excited to be here and learn from you guys, because I'm just getting my feet wet. So thanks.
Well, thanks, guys. Okay, I think what I'll do really fast is I'll just run through a few examples of alternative markets, and then I'll ask these guys their experience with selling through those markets, and we'll go through some of the pros and cons that they're aware of. So you can sell to restaurants, you can sell to school districts, you can sell to nursery for seed, you can sell at farmers markets, you can also sell to farmers market vendors, right? So not your own farmers market stall, but people sell to specialty grocery stores. I'm thinking of places like Bristol Farms, the high-end kind of specialty grocery stores. You can sell directly online. You can sell to an online a vendor, or I don't know if this is just my term, but I call it an online bundler. Some sort of purveyor of fresh produce online that they don't grow, or they don't sell all their own fruit, but they take from other farms as well, and they sell it online. You can even, I know some people who do pop-up sales, they call it, where they'll just be a kind of almost a sudden announcement, like next weekend we've got this for sale, come by and you can buy 10-pound bags of this for this much, and people call that pop-up sales. I'll just start out with David, because I know you have a lot of experience with farmers markets. Run through a little bit of the pros and cons of your experience selling at farmers markets.
Yeah, so when I first started farmers markets, it was a little bit difficult to get into any farmers market, because every farmers market available or that it's local already has a citrus and avocado vendor there. So the way that I've been able to get in is because we are certified organic, and we're growing an array of products, not only citrus and avocado. We have some subtropical fruits. So my way in there was because of that side, because we're organic and the subtropical side. And like I got Buddha hands, lychees, longans, dragon fruit, like 3 different kinds of guavas. And, I got greenhouses where I'm now growing tomatoes. So that's been my way in. And then I bring in the avocados as an extra. But yet that is the one, those items are the ones that are our moneymaker at the farmer's market, is the avocado, because everybody there is looking for a good eating avocado. And where I separate too is that we have 6 different varieties of avocado too. So that's been my way in, and been able to expand from being just in one farmer's market to 5 now in the past 4 years, and they're all local, which is great. We don't have to drive hundreds of miles, but we're in expansion mode right now. We're trying to get into the bigger, better markets, like in LA area or down further in San Diego. But that's been that's been my troubles even to get into those is that same thing. Oh, we already have an avocado vendor. We already have a citrus vendor. So that's where I've been hitting a wall to get into the better markets. So that's I would say that's the negative side to it. You know, the positive side is we're organic, and that's our way in. And for most farmers markets that are established, for example, Vista Farmers Market, I was applying for that market for 4 years now, and I finally got in like 4 months ago, and that was my way in. I mean, there's 5 other avocado guys there, but none of them are organic. I'm the only one there organic, so they're still making their money on the conventional side, or them charging a little bit less. I do charge a little bit more, but I'd sell to the people that appreciate the organic side of the market. People that want to eat healthier and less pesticides and all that good stuff, along with the rest of our array of products that are organic as well.
Well, thanks, David.
Yes.
Can I ask, because it seems I've heard from a lot of growers who are organic, or even sort of so beyond organic standards, so to speak, expressing the most need for alternative marketing outlets because they want to be able to charge the premium that they need to cover the extra costs of growing organic, and also to be able to kind of connect with the consumer to kind of tell the story of their fruit, which is something they can't really do if they just send the fruit away to someone else to sell. So can you guys share? I'll just leave this open for anyone who has that experience with the Dickinsons. I know you guys sell primarily organic fruit, so can you talk a little bit about that, the need for alternative markets with organic avocados specifically?
Sure. Yeah, so one of the things that really is the draw for the organic consumer is knowing the traceability of their fruit. And that's been in the news a lot. There's people that are distrusting where the fruit's coming from, if it's imported or whatever. So we do find that a consumer typically comes to our label and they're really excited when they see it in the grocery store, or they see it wherever we have it for sale, because we do market a California grown product 12 months out of the year. So that's definitely a draw for organic sales. The other thing that I think organic has going for it is it does offer the diversity and the variety. For example, we try to make a 12-month program for avocados, and we're marketing the Zutanos, the Ettingers, the Bacons, things like that. When our local CAS is done, we can give you a great avocado any time of the year. And that's not readily available on the commercial market. And in fact, it's, kind of downplayed, if anything, that you're not really going to see that variety coming from the big packers, and it's understandable. There's supply issues and whatnot, but we're a small packer. And so we can flex a little bit more with what's available, what's on the trees. So we really thrive on the diversity of organic farming. We currently pack over 35 different varieties of fruit all throughout the year, and 12 of those are avocados, I would say. So our consumers are very excited about that.
Can I, does anyone else want to add?
Yeah,
Okay.
farmers market, that is another great outlet for if you have a smaller or if you have like a bunch of Haas avocados and then you're interplanting the pollinators, like the Zutanos, the Bacons and all that, like I have over 4,000 Haas trees, and we have maybe 150, 200 green skin avocados. And that's a perfect item for the farmers market. Like they love those avocados at the farmers market because they don't see them anywhere else. And those are a banger every week. Like every weekend when I have them over the winter, people just love them. They go crazy over them. And they're a little bit cheaper than the Haas or the Reed avocados. So, I sell out every time I take, 300, 400, sometimes even 500 pounds every weekend too. Between my 5 market, we sell out completely. They love those avocado. People forget the flavor of them, and they're all super into the flavor of the Haas, and they forget how tasteful the greenskins are, because they're just not around.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that I'm able to bring that to the direct customers at the farmers market, and they talk about it and they love it and they give me all the great feedback on it.
Can I ask you guys while I'm thinking about it? What I know David and Andrew, you both mentioned half a dozen different varieties of avocados that you guys grow, sell, pack. What are the varieties? Andrew, what varieties do you guys deal with?
Yeah, so we do Hass, Lambs, Gems, Reeds, Pinkertons, Ettingers, Edrinols, Zutanos, Fortes. Haven't gotten into Charwells yet. Nick, you and I need to talk about that. I've tried them. I love them. Just need to find more of them. Basically, any avocado that I'm excited about, we go sell it. If it's available. Because, like David said, the consumer is just, they like California avocados, and too many of them have been burned by a bad avocado that they've purchased off the supermarket shelf, and they can trust a California typically, so we play on that big time.
Yeah. David, what varieties are
We
you?
got the Gem,
I forgot the Gems.
Surprise, Reed, Bacon, Zutano, and the Haas. Those are the 6 varieties that I bring to the farmers market. And and then the rest of the growth goes to the packing house.
Yeah. Nick, are you growing Charwell?
I do. I have a small.
Oh, sorry. I was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I didn't know which Nick Andrew was talking to, so you're growing some Charwell, Nick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, did you?
No. I don't grow them.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yes, no, we have some Charwells, and it's a very interesting variety, because I talked to a lot of growers that grew up on like Forte. Like my grandfather grew Forte. I prefer that over Hass, any day of the week. But it has that flavor, that creaminess, that nuttiness, and the fruit size is pretty large, and it has a lot of admirable, qualities. It's I'd put it up there with a Reed avocado as far as like a really good green skin.
Yeah. Yeah, I ate a Charwell yesterday that blew me away. That's just like, wow. Small seed, no fiber, all the flavor you could want. It was just like, wow. Okay, Nick, Stridsberg. I think you have sold fruit to school districts, right? Can you tell us a little bit about doing that? What's that like, pros and cons?
Yeah, so I think right now we sell to like 3 school districts, mostly San Diego. I have good and bad experiences like any customer. The prices are pretty good. We also sell to a vendor that sells to the schools. That's more like a wholesale outlet or kind of a repacker, I guess. But yeah, it's good. There's 2 different models. You can either develop a relationship with the schools, and they can just, I don't know how it works on their end, but they can just place orders whenever they need based on their budget. Or there's obviously the like RFPs that they send out. Like I think Vista does it every year. And they'll send it out, and you gotta, like a bid system. So yeah, it's good, and they're dependable, and they pay, which is really good in this business. And it's pretty competitive pay. I usually put out the prices to them because I have good relationships with them. So they'll ask me, what do you need for this? And I'll give them a price. And generally I'm pretty fair, but they know that. So, but yeah, mostly good experience with schools. Yeah.
Let's see, what have we not, does anyone have, would anyone like to share experience with another outlet? Restaurants or direct sales online? I definitely want to get to some direct sales online. Does Does anyone sell to restaurants?
Yes, the benefit of farmers market is a lot of restaurants actually advertise at their own restaurant that everything is purchased at farmers market. So I've been able to develop, maybe like 5 to 10 returning customers that don't come every weekend or every week, sometimes they disappear for like a whole month and then they come back. But I have 5 solid ones where they're every weekend buying my Buddha hands and my San Marzano tomatoes. They're Italian restaurant because they make everything from scratch. So they make their sauce from scratch. And that's where I've been able to find that little niche where they want those freshly picked tomatoes and the freshly picked Buddha hands for their sorbet. And then they make an avocado sorbet as well too. So that's another outlet for me besides just only the farmers market. I deliver to them on the side, so I don't have to pay that fee to the farmers market. And it's been great. And I could just see if I get into other farmers market that's going to come along with it. Not only the farmers market business, but the restaurant business as well.
Because in a sense, the farmers market has served as like an advertising outlet for people to find you. And
Exactly.
then, okay, yeah. Do you guys do any restaurant sales?
We do some, but more to a distributor. We found that for our scale, it hasn't worked as well to set up a restaurant route. Their orders are frequent but small as far as deliveries go. So we haven't been able to pencil that correctly. So we work with a couple distributors who then do food service, and they can take pallets of items from us and really move some volume. Greg, I would say we've learned a lot, and we're still learning in the last 3.5 years on just how do you move fruit from field through market. And with the exception of maybe a big nationwide contract, we've sold probably to every wholesale entity out there, everything from a middleman distributor to boutique retailers like you were talking about. We've sold to CSAs who do repacking with vegetable boxes. We sell online. We just started that this year. And what we found is, as growers, we're at the bottom of the food chain, so to speak. We're developing this product out in the field, taking a lot of risks with a lot of variables. And your fruit, after it's harvested from the tree, it passes through a lot of hands before it gets to the consumer. And everybody takes their chunk of the pie, and as they should. We're all compensated for what we do. We found that for us, the fewer hands reaching into that pie, the better, so if we can, on the first level, if we can be the grower and the packer and the distributor, that's our best margin. The next level would be if we can harvest for a grower, be the packer and the distributor, we can typically return a little bit better to them. And then the best return, of course, is if we skip all the wholesale outlets and we go directly to the consumer. And that is an area that we're just getting into. We started our website in February of this year, and it's gradually growing. It's a slow build. You do have to put money into it. You do have to spend the marketing dollars in order to get the looks on your website and ultimately the conversions to buy. But that's a very encouraging segment, and the consumer wants California produce. Conventional or organic, they want California produce. We have a name and a brand as a state, and the more that we can lean into that, the better. But back on the wholesale side, and specifically with restaurants, as David said, chefs are real particular. They want good quality products. It's just a matter of finding the economy of scale that works for your particular packing operation. And for us, distributors work best in that type of environment. We're not a big packer. This year we'll push about 2 million pounds of fruit across the 35 different varieties. That's growing year over year, but that's very small in comparison to Calavo or any other big packing house. So we have to be pretty divested in where we put our product.
Nick Stridsberg, you have some experience with restaurant sales?
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate what Andrew said, you know, he hit the nail on the head with like developing a route and if that works for you or not. I haven't found it to work well, for me. But I do currently sell to a couple restaurants, but that relationship was, I've weeded out a bunch and those relationships came from a distributor outside of California. You know, I sold to a distributor who has restaurant routes, mainly in the Midwest. Like for instance, I have one customer in Chicago they're like a Michelin star restaurant. And it's interesting, I sell them Haas avocados. I tried to sell them Gem a couple times, but I don't know what they do with it. They peel the skin off and they put it in vinegar or something and they serve it to their customers. I don't know, super fancy, but he'll only buy from me. He's like, I've tried other avocados, like yours are the best. I'm like, I taste the same as the next guy, that maybe Southern California avocados specifically. But restaurants are cool because they care, good restaurants, they care more about the flavor than the look. And since we're organic, it's like, you know, you don't have to be too stringent on the quality and stuff of the appeal of the fruit. First, it's like more like the quality. So we can focus on the flavor and stuff like that. So that's been really interesting to learn about, since we don't have all the, you know, cleaning, packing equipment to make the fruit nice and size it and do all that. It makes it really easy for us, and the price is really good too. So
Yeah, interesting.
yeah.
So how about on the grower side? Like maybe this can be a question for Nick, Krnich, and Jeff. From the grower side, the returns from a couple of these different marketing outlets, I know they vary, and I know they have different levels of time consumption and labor involved and stuff, but can you talk a little bit about that? Like, well, I guess just bottom line, like, is it generally worth the extra time and labor to do these alternative things compared to just letting the fruit drop on the ground or go to or sell to a major packing house if you can? Like, what's involved there, Jeff?
Yeah, it's you know, we're all full-time doing what we do. And that does not represent the average grower in San Diego County. San Diego County is 10 acres and less. So most of these are gentleman farmers who have another source of income besides avocados. So you only have so much time in the day to do what you do. And so the good news is that we have found is that the American people are very much behind what we do. And the difficulty is figuring out the right distribution method for you and the time that you have to get your fruit into their hands. They'll buy. You just have to figure out how to do it. So we represented, you know, I don't know, what we say, 6 or 7 different options. There's more. It's just you have to figure out what works for you and the margins of what you're trying to do is squeeze that margin, or I should say squeeze those number of hands that are in that pie, so that the direct consumer is actually putting more money back in your pocket. That's the first trick. The second trick is volume. And so if you've got 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 acres of avocados, you aren't going to move that through a farmer's market, at least not in any volume. You're not going to move that through restaurants. So you're always going to be faced with the fact that you've got to have multiple distribution outlets. And I think all of us here probably sell our fruit to packing houses. We sell our fruit to these other things. We no longer move our fruit through packing houses because we're big enough now to move our own stuff. But that's been 3 hard-fought years and full-time work. And that's not something that the average grower is going to want to take on, and rightly so. So I think for the average grower, they're always going to have multiple distribution outlets. And they just have to figure out what's going to work for them and the time they have to put in it.
Nick, do you want to add anything to that or?
Sure. I think there's kind of a spot that Jeff kind of touched on, but like say for the Charles, for example, if I have enough fruit off those trees for maybe 2 or 3 bins, that's not enough to a potential customer, say in Texas, that has like say 3 or 4 grocery stores. They want like a whole truck. So you get to a point as a grower, if you don't have that volume, as Jeff was talking about, you're kind of limited. And then say something like a Zutano, well, okay, you could sell it to farmers market, you could sell it to a nursery for seed. That's, you know, it's another thing. It's a very desirable seed. But I think there's still options though, if you do have the volume, say like a reed, or you do have enough fortes to, you know, to say like, I think it's what, 24,000 pounds to fill a semi truck, somewhere around there to do a container. If you do have that volume, you can find yourself, you know, doors opening up for you. And I had a opportunity with reed, and granted it happened after I finished picking for the year, but it was an opportunity nonetheless, where I could have took it out of state. And then I had another opportunity, and it's probably the weirdest opportunity I've had as a grower. But in 2020, it was August, and I had a friend down in Chile who wanted California Hass. Their whole market, like they didn't have anything for their domestic market. And so they were offering somewhere between like $2.50, $3, where the local markets were getting like 70 cents. We're just getting clobbered. All the growers remember that year, I'm sure. And so it was just such a quagmire to be in that position, not to have the fruit, but to have the opportunity. So, you know, and I usually pick early. I don't like to write it out and see how the heat's going to be. So, but it's just, I think being in that position, having the volume to do that. So, I think there's opportunities for growers. I think if you're all invested in Hass, one of the cost-effective solution, if you want to divest from Hass, is you could stump your trees. You can top work them to a different variety. You could reed. There's, you know, a lot of other varieties you can do, and you can get that volume that way. And you'll get those trees in production within 2 years. And with that massive root system, they're going to be pushing fruit, and you're going to have young budwood. It's like a new tree all over again. And I've done that on a couple thousand trees, and I'm doing more, and it's been great. I'm loving it. So
I want to talk a little bit of, you know, economy of scale. You know, Bill and I, you know, we're farming 130 acres of mainly citrus and avocado. But, you know, that we already know automatically it's either going to go to packing houses, or we're going to move them through our packing house, the limes, because we have 10,000 trees of organic Persian limes. We run all that through our packing house. That's why it was developed. But he specifically did a 20-acre ranch specifically for farmers market, but he just didn't have anybody to grow it. And here I came along, and I'm able to do all these things that he's not able to do. So like Dickinson's were saying, you know, as a farmer, you know, most of them are absentee, or they're kind of doing it for fun, or, you know, whatever the case is. You know, with Bill, he's an actual present farmer. He wants to develop the business. He wants to take it to the next level. That's why he brought me in to do all that. And what I love about it is that he has this specific 20 acres where he has a diversity of cultivars, you know. So that's why we've been able to develop the farmers market, because
and it's kind of 2 farms in one, in a sense, right?
Oh, exactly.
You've got like the farmers market farm.
Exactly.
Within
and then we have the economy of scale side of it, you know, and you know that puts us in a position to become a full lateral business, you know, and that's kind of the only way anybody's going to be able to make any money in this era now. You know, for somebody just to be a house farmer or a citrus farmer, and only that, and you know, take it to the packing house and do that whole thing is just that's the old way of farming. You know, you have to move with the flow and the new things that are happening in the world. You know, and then you got Mexico, and then you got everything else, it's just a big competition, even for organic, even if you're in the organic business, it's changed so much. We were talking about it at the Fresh Floral Council, they were just talking about how much it's changed over the past 10 years, 15, 20 years ago, they were selling boxes for $70, $80 a box. When I was working in Oxnard, I was a row crop farmer in Oxnard, and we were selling cilantro boxes for $80 a box of organic cilantro. I was working with Deardor Family Farms, and now they don't farm anymore. It's just, there's no point. So you just have to figure out who you are and get into those niche markets. If you're not getting into those niche markets, it's going to be really, really hard for you to make it in the farming industry nowadays.
Yeah, thanks. Nick Stridsberg, I know you have some experience in this area of changing what you grow. I know you used to grow more avocados than you do now, and you have changed the way you market and everything. Can you talk a little bit about that, about the San Gabriel Ranch evolution into what you're doing now?
Yeah. So, I mean, my dream would be to just farm and sell to a packing house and get a good return. I think that would be my dream. That's what my dad used to do, and we used to make good money doing it. And like David said, it's just not a reality anymore. I can't see it coming back, or just with the cost of everything, doing business and water. So I mean, the first things first, you got to have a good farm. Like if you don't have anything going for you in terms of like your water situation, your trees are not healthy. I mean, we bought 50 acres of an avocado grove that was like adjacent to our property, and the trees were pretty old and they had been like injected and they were in poor health, and we stumped them all, and it was all on city water. And this is like 10 years ago or something, and the market kind of kept getting worse and worse. And so eventually we're losing so much money every year that, I finally had to have the hard conversation to like just turn the water off on that farm. And slowly but surely we've been replanting that with a bunch of different varieties, whether it be like cut flowers or mangoes or new avocados. But the reality was like when our citrus grove kind of, the returns at the packing houses got worse and worse, or they went out of business, like most of our business, like Sundance or these other guys. So yeah, remind me the exact question.
No, it was just that. It was the evolution of how you guys have changed what you've been growing.
So we had to figure out, I was like, okay, how do we, like Andrew was saying, like, how do you get as close to the consumer as possible? Without, the best obviously would be if the consumer came out and picked their own.
Yeah.
That's the best model, right? Like that you pick. That's ideal. But with an avocado farm, it's a little hard, I don't think you want them up there on ladders and stuff. So anyways, just started calling up every single, whether it be distributor, school, grocery store. I had people like laugh me out the door. I think I called like Albertsons, Bonds, and they're like, you're tiny and like you're a hobby farmer, and I'm like, you pick like 1 million+ pounds a year, like how, I think I do pretty okay, But anyways, that's like I had this conversation with my wife when she started her business. It's like it kept getting shut down and turned away. I'm like, dude, for every yes, you're gonna hear like 50 no's, right? So you just gotta be resilient, and luckily, I could go full time with it. And even then it's hard because my trees suffer because I don't get to pay enough attention to them because I'm out selling, or I'm doing the transportation, or I'm doing the paperwork. So yeah, you just gotta like figure it out as you go. But the key thing I think is like having the network and having the resources. Like all of us here, like I just met Nick, but we all work together. We all like, if we have something we need help with, we call each other and we can help sell it, or, hey, I have this commodity and help to move it. You know, what are you seeing here? I can't fulfill this order. Can you fulfill it for me? It's not like we're in competition with each other, you know, trying to work together. And I think you have to stick together because there's not a lot of us left. So, you know, and another aspect was it started out as helping other farmers, you know, because I felt bad for them because they didn't have any resources to sell their fruit. And it ended up hurting me because I would give them such a good return, but buying fruit and selling fruit, you know, I've had years where I've made more income from that than my own farm, because I have the contacts now and the resources to move the fruit. So, yeah, it's been a tough road, but you know, you have a good base on your farm and good varietals, like I think you do okay and diverse and not what everybody else has.
Greg, with that, I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap this part up and go to the questions.
Yeah, sounds good.
Bring Gary back up for, and then the whole board. Really appreciate this, you guys. It was really enlightening.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing some of your trade secrets. And thank you for letting me know where I can get my Sherwells now. This has been really good. For those of you that don't know, this is our first time ever that we've had a CAS meeting Zoom from the Farm Bureau office here in Escondido. And first time I've ever worked with a robot, and it's a little creepy, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna open up the questions. Travis, believe it or not, had a bee emergency. As he mentioned, he has a bee rescue business. And he said, once people start spraying water on the swarm, he has to get there pretty quick. So what he wanted me to do was tell everybody, if you have any questions that we can't answer, which we probably can't because they're bee questions, please send him an email at BeeLeafUSA, BeeleafUSA.com, and he'd be happy to answer any questions at all about bees. Again, BeeleafUSA.com. Travis was great, but he ran out of here like he was being chased by a hive. With that, Sosin, can you open the questions from the chat, because we're kind of a distance from the computer here and we can't read it. If you want to ask the questions to the group.
I will read them off for you. Well, the first question was about bee. And I guess I will make sure she have the email address to ask that question. The next one, any recommendation for supporting native bee population in avocado groves? I don't know if any of you can answer that.
It's mainly done for to increase your soil fertility, but there are a lot of growers that are doing cover crops. And there's been a lot of great success for that, because that's a foraging opportunity as well for the bees. And so you can have different clovers, vetches, I believe. There was a masterclass video on Avocado, not Avocado Source, but Cafe Avocado YouTube channel a week ago. And if you could find it up, it's I can't remember the gentleman's name.
Oh,
but there was two guys on there, but they went in very detail about using the cover crops, and I would suggest that.
The only problem with cover crops is they use water too, you know, and that's kind of a negative here in San Diego.
Yeah.
Next question. What is thought to be the cause of colony collapse disorder?
I've heard some things about that. Actually, there's when we were at the height of that, they had a bee professor at UC Davis working on that. They were finding about 2 or 3 different kinds of viruses in there. The mites were very dominant, and like Travis said, the lack of flowering, and then pesticides. You know, they use Agrimec on all kinds of crops, and so they might not get enough from one crop, but they accumulated from several different kinds.
Gary, are you going to talk about benefits of foliar nutrient sprays during bloom to assist with fruit set?
Oh, yeah, I didn't mention that. We did some trials back several years ago, spraying different kind of nutrients on the flowers right in the mid flowering. We tried to time it about April 10th to April 15th. And we did see some that looked really good. I mean, there's this one called Grangetto's Grow Getter increased the fruit set 100% for about 2 years in a row. And the third year it didn't. Fourth year it didn't. So we were unclear about what was going on with that. But that particular product and a lot of the products are just a mixture of minor elements. And I believe that particular product also had some kelp extract from off the coast of Maine. And I think there's possibility that's what's really doing it.
Next question for Gary. Do you think we will see lower fruit set due to cooler temperatures this season?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of growers, including growers in Ventura and Santa Barbara and down here in San Diego.
A new grower, avocado farming, and they're wondering just they had our first harvest. Would like to know, is this a good time to prune the trees?
Well, I'd like to know if they're on a high density or not. How old the trees are. I would say probably a very light pruning. I don't know, and I don't know what spacing they're on, but we believe the height of the trees should be about 80% of the spacing. So that means if you're on a 10 by 10, you need to keep your height about 8 feet, and it'll grow up a foot or two, and then you just come back the next year and top that tree. Keep topping it, and a little bit of side pruning. And
Mary Lou is just have a comment. The starch content work was done by the research group led by Inaki Hormaza in Malaga, Spain. Next question was, will grafting at a type B on a type A accomplish the same thing as a full tree?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you want to top work a Hass to a Bacon or a Zutano or Fuerte, yes, and I think somebody mentioned that here, didn't it? It comes back really quickly.
In fact, you can do 3. You can cover the whole window. You can do Zutano, Forte, and Edinger or Everdawn all in the same tree. And ACW farms, it's very impressive how they did that over there. Although you're going to have to individually manage each of those varieties. The Zutano will probably be the most vigorous, so you're probably going to have to be more aggressive on pruning on that particular leaf.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah. Zutanos grow very, very quickly straight up.
Pruning question. We are in Ventura County. If we prune now, does it affect the pollination, flowering?
Well, we tried to figure that out, and we we harvested from about in a normal year, about April 15th to May 1st, I believe. And then we did our major pruning right then. Or maybe a little earlier. They usually about the last of March to the first 2 weeks in April. That's a better statement, I think. And then we did our major pruning. This tree was still in flower, so we still had enough flower to set a good crop for the next year. But we had to figure out a time to do the pruning, and that's about the best we could come up with. But I remember talking to Leo McGuire about this one time, and he said, Gary, we can't have the entire industry pruning the last week of March, which is, yeah, we're set up to be harvesting through the year. So I think that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's undecided. I don't know about you guys over here, but
I think with pruning, it really depends on the management system, because like everybody's system is going to be different. Like if you prune and girdle, that's a whole different, conversation, but a system unto itself. But if you're just not doing anything at all, that's a different approach. And then it's like, okay, the tree is now, 20 feet tall and it's 10 by 10. Like what do you do? And then you showed us pictures of what happens. So I think it really is very dependent on the practice. I don't think there's a best practice, but there is a lot of research that shows that if you prune every year, you get the regeneration. And then I think that really needs to be looked in on a much more detailed level.
yeah.
Thank you, Nick. This question is for all the panelists. In each case, how do you have it inspected and pay your CAC and HAP fees?
Okay.
Yeah, so on your avocados, if you're packing them for wholesale, you do need to have CDFA come out and stamp them. Each box has to be, a sample of your lot has to be analyzed to make sure you're packing according to size. And then a stamp from CDFA releases that fruit to the market. You would know more on the HAB and the CAC fees, how that works.
It's just a monthly reporting and send in a check.
Oh, for farmers market, we're exempt from that. We just need to make sure that the avocados are released.
Variety by variety.
Variety by variety.
Can I ask if there's a variety that's doesn't have a release date? What then? Charlotte, for example.
LA County is the only one with an issue. They actually, the agriculture commissioner comes out every 3 weeks or every month to inspect every booth. And if you don't have an avocado release form, they'll give you a notice of non-compliance. The first time is okay, but if you keep doing it, it could be up to a $10,000 fine.
And that's just in LA.
In LA, that's where I've gotten the most problems. Riverside, San Diego County area, they really don't mess with you on that. But I don't like to take avocados before they're released because they don't ripen or they taste like crap, and we don't want that for our clientele. So I always make sure to take avocados with the highest oil concentration and all the good stuff. So I go with the waves.
Yeah.
You can go to here in Escondido, they do have the USDA facility that you can get for the dry matter testing. But certain varieties like the Charlotte, I think you could probably find what the acceptable dry matter is online. I believe there's a data for them somewhere. But if you're passing the minimum, of course, as a grower, do you want to, with David's point, do you want to take that risk, even if you're passing on, say, large or medium-sized fruit? Do you want to take that risk where one of them doesn't have that right taste, and then that's kind of a risk, you have to consider.
I have a question. Yeah, when you have a high density grow, maybe like Dick Krnich has over there, and you're keeping your trees pruned low, the one marketing technique I've never heard of is a U-pick operation. I've never ever heard that. Now, I think David, somebody said you don't want to have people on the ladders, but you don't give them a ladder and you keep it low, and a lot of the fruit can be picked from the ground. Have you ever considered that?
I think the problem is most of the terrain is mostly sloped, right? So it's kind of hard for like a standard U-pick would be like strawberries and be flat, and I don't know, and then you got to deal with liabilities and snakes and breaking sprinklers and all that.
Irrigation.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, right. I've heard of you pick up apples up in Julian, but they had people climbing up in the trees, and you don't want that either. So.
Okay, for the group, the conversation has moved to sunblotch and how it's becoming more prevalent and harder to test for. And that was basically the question to the group is how are we not? And the other question, if no one could hear it, was Rick commented that he caught somebody self-picking his grove, and it was not on purpose, and the guy was reaching over the barbed wire fence. So.
U-pick operation.
Yeah, a U-pick operation. So, okay, thanks, Rick. I think we pretty much handled that. Yeah, it is a problem. We know about it, and the older trees, now that they're getting stressed, and they're starting to see some.
David, what herbicide he uses on his organic farm, and what type of fertilizer does he use too?
Herbicides, no herbicides. We do mechanically. We chop down all of our weeds and we leave some patches for the beneficial insects. And for the fertilizer, we use an 822, the farm's choice from Hickman Farms in Arizona. It's great stuff. Nick introduced me to it. And we're using it on everything now. We were about 90% organic. Now we're going 100%, and I'm just going to use it on everything now. It's great stuff. It uptakes very well with the trees. It's slow release, and we're just loving it.
Another question, there's is curious about licensing issues when sending fruit across state line.
Yeah, so basically you just want to make sure that you're packing to standard. Your customer will tell you what level of food safety, for example, regulation they'll need. We are food safety certified. You can go get your GAP certification. You have your liability in place, your food safety in place. For us, our organic handler certification in place. Then your fruit is good to go. There are certainly instances where you might have a hold on a certain variety of fruit, but typically, if you cover those three bases, then you're good to ship across state lines. And there's a variety of different ways you can do that, obviously, but most commonly for us, we'll cross-dock fruit up in LA, and we take the fruit to a handler who then takes our pallet and puts it on a truck. And from that point, it's no longer our responsibility in terms of the shipping. The customer assumes the liability. So we ship FOB to the cross-dock. And that's definitely a preferable way versus, you have FOB all the way back to New York or whatever. You're incurring that liability the whole way.
So, I think with that, we will wrap it up. Andrew and Jeff Dickinson with Dickinson Family Farms, and they have a website that everyone can go to. David Estrella with Limelight Groves. They also have a website, Limelight Groves. Nick Stridsberg, San Gabriel Ranch. Do you have no website, but that's that. And Nick Krnich with Everdawn Farms. I don't believe you have any website.
I do have a website, but I haven't launched it yet.
Okay.
But I have an email if anyone has questions. It's Nick@Everdawn Farms, all one word.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I'll post your guys' information on the Avocado Society website, and then
Okay, and with that, I want to remind everybody that the website is California Avocado Society.org. When you type that in, it will not be the first one that will come up. The commission will come up with the next one down. Make sure it says .org. And again, I want to thank today's speakers.